This is a Fox News alert. Is this a case of a prosecutor gone wild? Why did Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby indict Officer Edward Nero and drag him to trial? Personal vendetta? Personal gain? Just hours ago, a judge found Officer Edward Nero not guilty on every count in connection with the death of Freddie Gray. And tonight on the record, expert legal panel investigates. Ted and Katie are standing by, but right now, Griff Jenkins on the ground and taking you inside court today. Griff?
That's right, Greta. Judge Barry Williams finding Officer Edward Nero not guilty on all 4 charges, saying that the state failed to meet its burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt in each count. You'll remember those charges were second-degree assault, reckless endangerment, and 2 counts of misconduct in office. In his finding, Judge Williams said that Nero was legally justified in his actions with regards to the assault charge and that he was not criminally liable in the reckless endangerment charge for failing to seatbelt Freddie Gray. At the center of this trial, Greta, was the question of whether or not a lawful stop evolved, as the state alleged, into an unlawful arrest. The key testimony came from Officer Garrett Miller, who testified that he alone detained and arrested Freddie Gray. So earlier today, Ted Williams and I returned to the scene of the original arrest to walk through the facts.
The testimony in court by Officer Garrett Miller is that at this location, it is where Officer Garrett Miller stopped Freddie Gray, arrested Freddie Gray, handcuffed Freddie Gray. Miller testified that he then walked Freddie Gray up this street where the van was awaiting him. So Nero went to get the bicycle. Miller walked him up here to the van, and it was in this location, in this area, that Officer Miller testified that he put Freddie Gray in the van on the right side of the van. The only thing that Nero did in this case was to go and to get Miller's bicycle, because Miller had left it in a location as he was chasing Freddie Gray.
And once they're putting Freddie in the van, that's the first physical contact that Officer Nero has with Gray. Is that correct?
When they are putting him in the van, there's some contact with him because they believe that Freddie Gray needed an inhaler. And so at that stage, Nero had some physical contact with him to try to help him if he needed an inhaler. They did not find an inhaler. They closed the van's door, and they left, and they went up the street.
As for the scene here outside the courtroom, there have been no significant protesters, no riots, either here around the courthouse or over in western Baltimore where this all took place. We have the next trial coming up in just 2 weeks, Greta. That will be that of Cesar Goodson, the van driver, in early June. Greta?
Griff, thank you. And joining me, the lawyer for the Freddie Gray family, Billy Murphy, goes on the record. Good evening, sir.
Hi, Greta. How are you?
Very well. So what do you think of the judge's decision? He was the fact finder. He was the jury in this case.
Well, Judge Williams is known far and wide, contrary to some earlier opinions on your network, as an extraordinarily fair jurist who spent the last 5 or 6 years of his career prosecuting crooked cops and prosecuting brutalizing cops. And so I'm not surprised that Barry Williams is a scrupulously fair jurist who called it the way he saw it. Those of us who didn't sit through the trial, however, have no further comment on the evidence because that's irresponsible. You can miss a key piece of evidence that can... hold on, Greta. Let's talk one at a time, if you don't mind.
Okay.
If you miss any part of this trial, you can miss critical evidence that would make all the difference in the world about the outcome. And so nobody should be expressing opinions about whether this was a fair outcome on either side unless they've heard all of the evidence and heard the summations, et cetera.
Now, I don't disagree with you on that, but tell me this. Is there any evidence that Officer Edward Nero did anything but go retrieve the bicycle and perhaps help locate an inhaler that you know of, that you've heard of, that you've read about?
Well, I heard the summation of the evidence by Judge Williams, and I didn't hear the evidence at trial, so I'm not prepared to answer that question.
But based on what the judge said in summation, did he say that the officer did anything but retrieve the bicycle and help with the inhaler?
Well, I think that Judge Williams' ruling will be available in toto, I hope, because he wrote it out before he gave it. And so that will educate all of us much more than I could ever do on the entire basis for his ruling.
But did you remember?
Greta, I don't want to get into that. Ask me a more important question.
I know, but you're a lawyer in the courtroom. You're listening to the judge tell the decision. You represent the family. I'm sure you're concentrating on the facts of the judge's ruling. Did the judge say anything at all that said that the officer did anything but fetch the bicycle and get the inhaler, or try to help with the inhaler? Did he say anything?
I think he also said that he was at the scene where the van was emptied the first time, 1 block away, and I think he also mentioned that he had some role in putting Freddie Gray into the van. I believe he said something about that.
All right, this is just one officer with one piece of this whole story. I'm not talking about any of the other officers. Would you, if you were a prosecutor, I know, Billy, you're a smart lawyer, you've been around Baltimore for a million years, everybody knows you, even as far as here as Washington, D.C., we know about your work. Would you have indicted this man, this officer? I'm not talking about the others, but
Greta,
this one.
you know that's an outrageous question, because I wasn't sitting where she was sitting. I didn't get the information she was getting. I didn't have to make the judgments that she made. I'm not going to speculate about what I would have done.
Oh, Billy, you speculate
you know
every single
that's
day.
Not
that's
fair.
What we lawyers do. I mean, we lawyers talk about the evidence every single day. Speculate's another word for saying the facts. Is there any, I mean, would you have indicted this guy?
I don't know. I don't know what she had on her plate before she made the decision.
Well, based on what the judge said today, would you have indicted him?
Now, Greta, you know you're not going to get any more of an answer than the one I gave you.
All right. Well, let me talk just briefly. Let me sort of switch gears. And I know that, I mean, this was a horrible death, this Freddie Gray, and it's very, I imagine the family's heartbroken. How did they respond when they heard the news today?
The family responded the same way that they have always responded, including to the hung jury and the lead up to the trial, and that is that let's let the process work if it's going to work fairly, and let's stand by the result of a fair process without making any prejudgment about who did what to whom, when, and how, because they recognize that unless you hear the evidence completely, you don't have a right to express an opinion unless you want to be unfair. And so that's their approach here. They're calm about it. They're not emotionally overwrought about the decision, and they had faith that Judge Williams made the correct call. And we're blessed to have somebody who's not going to be influenced by public opinion. And your station was rife with speculation about whether Judge Williams was playing to the audience or whether he was following
I don't know where you get that, Billy. Billy, just stop that. I don't know where you get that.
Greta,
I mean, no, if you want to talk about our show, I'm happy to do that. I've actually had people in the courtroom. I know, but I mean, let's talk about my show. If you got a gripe with me, tell me. If you have a gripe with my show, tell me. But we had someone in the courtroom at most of this trial, if not the entire trial.
So if I think that the whole network's approach to the black community is racist, and that's a relevant thing to say during this program, I can't say it?
We were in court every single day, Billy. Look, Billy, I know you very well. I know the way that you're trying to play this. I got the picture. I wasn't born yesterday. I got that. But if you have a problem with my show, tell me. I'll talk to you about that. But I haven't stated a problem with your show. If you've been listening carefully to me. Okay, good. I'm just checking that. Anyway, all right, Billy. Always nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you too.
And so tonight, we are asking, why did Prosecutor Marilyn Mosby seek an indictment of Officer Edward Nero? In a statement, Officer Edward Nero's attorney, Mark Zayon, saying the state's attorney for Baltimore City rushed to charge him, as well as the other 5 officers, completely disregarding the facts of the case and the applicable law. The on-the-record legal panel is here. Former prosecutor Katie Fang and former homicide detective and criminal defense attorney Ted Williams. Ted was inside the Baltimore courthouse during the whole trial. Ted, we're only talking about the one officer. I don't know what the evidence is against the other officers or what will be shown or not shown. What we're talking about, this officer. Should this officer, Edward Nero, have been indicted and brought to trial, in your opinion?
This officer should not have been indicted at all, Greta. I sat in that courtroom, I listened to the evidence, and it was shameful that the prosecutors did not have any case whatsoever, and they put this man Nero through hell. and he should not have been. They got so desperate that they brought another officer in, Miller, and they offered him immunity. And Miller came in, and Miller is the one who said, I arrested, I handcuffed, I led Freddie Gray to the van. And he said Nero had nothing to do with it. And guess what? An African-American judge, Barry Williams, weighed his credibility and believed everything that Officer Miller said concerning Nero and the fact that Nero had absolutely nothing to do with the arrest of Freddie Gray.
Katie, look, I'm not talking about the other officers and what they may have done or not done, but about Officer Nero. And to me, sitting on this, you know, as I've been listening to this unfold, in fact, let's play a soundbite of what I said the other night on this. Because loading someone into a van is not in sort of the criminal conduct. He didn't handcuff him, make a bad arrest, and he also didn't put him in the van, and he had no obligation to seatbelt him according to the regulations. So I'd leave it at that. But I'll tell you one thing, I wouldn't leave it. You know, Katie, there was never any evidence, even as, you know, there's nothing that this guy retrieving a bicycle or doing whatever he's accused of doing, there was never even any reason for this prosecutor to charge this officer. Do you agree or disagree?
I absolutely agree. You want to talk about Billy Murphy's statement about a fair process and no prejudgment? Well, Marilyn Mosby, she didn't give Officer Nero fair process, nor did she allow for no prejudging on her part. Officer Nero, he was acquitted properly by Judge Williams. Judge Williams actually, during his oral pronouncement of the verdict today, said there was no credible facts that would support the 4 charges that were brought against Officer Nero. If I were Nero's lawyers, I'd go for a malicious prosecution lawsuit against Marilyn Mosby's office.
You know, it's just stunning to me, Katie, and Ted. It's like people don't realize is how painful it has been for this officer. I'm sure he's a proud officer. And to have been put through this process and to be accused of the most unthinkable things by a prosecutor. I know she's JV or what her problem is, but if that's her best evidence, it is appalling that she subjected him to that. I don't know what the evidence would be for the other officers, and I do know that someone died in custody, and I'm very interested in hearing the evidence. But to do this to this officer, Ted, just makes me crazy. Your thought?
Absolutely. A prosecutor is there to seek justice. And this was an injustice just to charge this man when there was no evidence. If I was in that prosecutor's office and they asked me to try this case against an officer without any evidence, I would resign before I would do such an act. This was an embarrassment and a sad day in the annals of Baltimore when you charge an officer. And I'm just happy that Judge Barry Williams, no relationship to me, found this officer not guilty on all of the counts and charges.
Ted, Katie, stay with us. We'll have more on the record.